This is the Digital Marketing Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the active resistance against bad digital marketing. This is the Digital Marketing Podcast and I am DM Punk. This is episode number 27 and today we're talking about the power of podcasting. Yes, this very thing that you are listening to. This episode was recorded in May of 2020. Okay, hello everybody. I hope you are all staying safe and staying well during this not very nice time where we are all locked down, staying indoors. It's the right thing to do. Let's stay safe. Okay, really cool episode today because I've literally just got off the line with doing an interview with the fantastic founder and CEO of podcast.co and matchmaker.fm. If you don't know what either of them are, let me explain. Podcast.co is a podcast management and hosting platform. It is a fantastic podcast hosting and management platform, I should say. It is where this very own podcast is hosted. And if you are thinking of starting up your own podcast, which you should be, if you are in any way in some kind of, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a business person and you're thinking of marketing your business to a very niche, specific audience, then yeah, why not start a podcast? Why not get some content out there? Get some valuable content out there for people to listen to. You should be doing that. You should be doing that right now. Matchmaker.fm is a really awesome brand spanking new platform by James and his team of people. He's created a platform which matches guests and podcast hosts together so they can find each other. So if you're a podcast host and you're looking for guests about, I don't know, something like marketing, for example, you can go away and you can find guests related to marketing. Maybe you want to find some marketing managers. Maybe you want to find some experts at YouTube or Facebook advertising or Snapchat or TikTok, hell, I don't know, but you can find all the experts that you are looking for on matchmaker.fm. Or if you are a person, an expert yourself, maybe you have a story to tell, maybe you have something to talk about and you think that there's a podcast out there that will want to hear your story. Or if you're a business person or entrepreneur and you want to have a platform to talk about your business, then that is the place to go to find podcasts that are going to be relevant to you and your prospective clients and customers. So I do highly recommend that you go and check that out. But first of all, what I think you should do is you listen to what James has to say. We talked about a lot of things. We talked about podcasting and its resurgence and the fact that it's now an old technology, but it's come back and it's now the it thing. We talked about both the platforms, Matchmaker and podcast.co. And we also talked about how he actually went and marketed these things because they're not easy things to do. You know, a podcast platform is a crowded, complicated market. How did he go ahead and build a platform and a viable platform, a popular platform? How did he do that? How did he market that? And how is he now thinking about marketing Matchmaker.fm, which is something so specific and niche, but it's got a massive audience. So how'd you get that word out? I talked to him about that as well. Plus, right at the very end, if you are thinking about starting your own podcast, which may be the reason that you're listening to this, then he has some fantastic advice for any of you that are thinking of starting a podcast yourself. And it is the best advice. And I completely agree with his advice because it's the advice that I give everybody who asks me the same question. But enough from me. Let's go straight into it. This is James Mulvany from Podcast Co and Matchmaker.fm. And we are talking about the power of podcasting. Okay, so today with me, I'm very excited to have James Mulvany. How are you doing?
I'm good, Tom. How are you?
I'm not too bad. You are from, well, I'm going to sort of allow you to introduce yourself, but you're from Podcast Co, but you have a very wide and varied history. You've got quite the portfolio of businesses going.
Yeah, I'm kind of an entrepreneur through and through, really. I think weirdly enough, I've never actually had a job. I've never worked for anyone. So I started really young. When I was 16, left school, I got a PayPal account on my 16th birthday because I was like, right, I need to make some money online. And everyone else was going out and getting jobs in, McDonald's or whatever. And I was like, I want to sort of see how I can make some money on the internet. So I've always had sort of little businesses and over the sort of the last sort of 15 years have grown, we've got a team of about 30 now across both companies. So I have radio.co at the moment and podcast.co. And I've had a few other startups in the past as well, some of which I've sold, some of which haven't worked, and some of which have just kind of been merged into what we're doing now.
You're not wrong when you say you are an entrepreneur through and through.
Yeah.
It's quite the portfolio, like you say. Podcast.co is what I want to talk about at the moment. How
Yep.
did the platform come about? Because you now have built over the past couple of years a podcast management platform, a hosting provider for anyone that wants to host a podcast. So how did that come about?
Yeah, so we, as I mentioned, we had radio.co, and obviously there is this sort of similarity in that the audiences that we serve. And a lot of customers are coming to us saying, we're thinking about doing a podcast for our radio station. We're saying, yeah, that's a great idea. And we looked at the market and we thought, rather than building into the existing platform, it really kind of commanded its own platform. So we thought, let's create podcast.co, and creates an experience. A lot of the hosts that we looked at that have been around for many years, and I won't start naming them, but they're kind of really old school. Like the user experience wasn't very good. They were clunky. They weren't particularly easy to use. And I really felt like they weren't very friendly for people who are looking to start out. So what we wanted to do is create something that was, easily accessible for someone who perhaps didn't have very much experience, and just a lot more of a kind of unified, a beautiful experience, I guess, in terms of the design of the product and the experience, as you're kind of creating your podcast, etc. And that was really the initial goal of the platform. We wanted to make something super clean and super simple.
And I think you definitely achieved that, because I'm obviously, I've had the Digital Marketing Podcast now for some time, and I hopped around and I went, well, I'll go. I thought I'm a bit of a nerd. I'll go self-hosted, but that becomes sometimes a little bit too demanding to ask for one person to sort of manage. So I went over to some of the big names in kind of podcast hosting, and you're absolutely right when you talk about, they can be very clunky, they can be very heavy, they can be not very user friendly at all. And when I eventually integrated myself over onto your platform, it was a very nice interface. It was very, very seamless, and so I think you can tick one of those big achievements off, because you definitely achieved that.
Yeah, and one of the other things as well is, obviously you're familiar with how marketing tech has kind of gone over the last few years. We wanted to be a platform that was really looking at integrations and how we could develop value and tools around that as well, which is how Matchmaker was born, and we'll get onto that in a bit. But for example, we've just added Zapier integration. I don't know if there's anyone else offering that, but if you look at a lot of tools in marketing, most platforms have got some kind of integration with Zapier, and it allows you to kind of extend. And we're sort of moving down that route where we're building more integrations. We also built an integration with a company called Headliner, which is a tool basically to produce videos. So when you sign up to podcast.co, you actually get a Headliner account included as part of that, which allows you to build assets for social media, etc. And I think that's the way to go, is working with emerging platforms and working with integrations that allow you to link things together, because ultimately as a marketer, the more automation you can use, the more time it saves you.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. In terms of, I'm a digital marketing manager in my day-to-day role, and, working with a whole series of tools. I suppose we all dream and hope of one day having that ultimate tool that'll do everything for you. In fact, I'm in a WhatsApp group at the moment full of creatives that they're calling themselves. And, there was one in particular individual that was saying, what platform do you use? And I'm going, well, what for? And it basically went, everything. And I went, if only that existed, but it doesn't. What you have to do, because everyone works in different ways, everyone operates in different ways. What you actually need to do is you need to find the platform that suits you and make sure that everything integrates with each other to make your life as seamless as possible. And sometimes I think people feel comfortable when they're just working with one platform because they just want it to do everything for them, and they feel scared when they go, well, I'm going to have this tool for this, and I'm going to have this tool for this, and I'm going to have this tool to this. But they do integrate with each other, even though they're not necessarily all built by the same developer. It's just about finding that integration. So it is really, really important. Let's talk about podcasting and marketing, because it is one of the biggest sort of trends, I suppose, that's coming around at the moment. Now, podcasting itself has been around for absolutely donkey's years. I remember many, many moons ago, and I think it was in 2001, 2002, when I was listening to the Ricky Gervais and Carl Pilkington podcasts and that were going around, and they were very, very popular. They were number one in the charts. It's been around for a long, long time. What has happened with podcasting throughout that time, and why are we seeing such a resurgence now?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it has been driven by things like the wider availability of data on mobile phones. Back in the late 2000s, podcasting was really something that was reserved for the enthusiasts. So in order to get a podcast, you had to download it first onto, your computer, and then you had to transfer it. Back then it was via physical, like cable, into your iPhone or your iPod rather. And some people would have iPods, some people didn't, so it was kind of, to transfer audio onto your iPod wasn't that easy, and it wasn't something you kind of always updated. Whereas obviously now you get the latest episode onto your phone, while you're walking around town, which is great, But I think so that's been one of the reasons that sort of consumption's gone up. I think also just the amount of money that's been invested into podcasting by bigger brands. They've started to see it as more of a viable route to market and a viable communication platform versus maybe 5 years ago, which has also driven up consumer sort of awareness. Companies like the BBC have invested in sort of BBC Sounds, and they've got a lot of celebrity podcasts on there. Famously Gemma Collins, I think it was like last summer or the summer before, she said at the start of the summer she didn't know what a podcast was. By the end of the summer, she was number one on the entertainment category in the UK because she's got that celebrity status, and of course everyone just flocked to listen to her podcast, even though she didn't even know what the medium was at the start of the summer. So I think things like that have triggered wider spread knowledge of what podcasting is, and kind of and driven up listener figures, basically.
To say that Gemma Collins will take every opportunity is probably an understatement, but I've noticed that she's now got her own lockdown show on ITV. I don't think it was obviously solely driven by Gemma Collins, but I think certainly companies like the BBC investing into it and celebrity uptake has really contributed to perhaps people who weren't really aware or wouldn't go to the kind of the extent of actually understanding, well, how do I listen to podcasts? And of course, they're listening to that, and then they start seeing other podcasts and think, oh, that sounds interesting. So it kind of is that snowball effect. What is it about podcasting that's made it so? I don't know. It made it so powerful now as a marketing tool, because it's obviously we have lots of different mediums now. We're now in a modern age where we can now converse with customers and converse with brands through video and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram stories and TikTok. Now everyone's dancing on TikTok while everyone's on lockdown. What is it about podcasting that makes it so very different? Because for me personally, it is very, very different. I consume podcasts by the absolute bucket load. So what is it about it?
I think, well, first and foremost, as marketers or entrepreneurs, we have a huge amount of time available that you don't have via other mediums. People will sit and listen to your podcast as long as it doesn't just sound like a promotional message from end to end, but people will engage with the podcast for quite some time. There's statistics out there that show that people listen to, generally speaking, like 70% of the episode. So when you're scrolling through your feed on Facebook or Instagram, you've got seconds to get people's attention, literally, and then quite often maybe 30 seconds on YouTube or something like that. With podcasts, people are paying attention for 20 minutes. So that's really valuable as a marketing tool. And also, I think, it allows you to sort of think a bit more about telling stories. And because audio is the oldest form of communication, right? It's been around since before we could write. So it's still got that sort of personal touch. And I think perhaps podcasts are seen by the public as more of a kind of impartial source of information. What do you think?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I agree with you there, because let's take the current circumstances that we are currently find ourselves in, and it's very difficult for me to consume information through the mainstream media, because I'm going to be swayed on one way or the other depending on the medium. But I'm taking a lot of my COVID-19 information at the moment through daily podcasts, which are at the top of the league tables at the moment. They're at the top of the rankings because they are so popular, and for me they are very impartial. I'm not feeling like I'm being swayed either way. I feel like I'm getting it almost direct from the source, which I think makes me feel a whole lot more comfortable.
So I think, that's probably one of the other reasons why people feel so connected to them versus, just sort of other forms of media.
let's talk about Matchmaker.fm. It's your new platform, because one of the major challenges I've certainly found doing a podcast in this sort of niche, so we call it, this sort of vertical, is trying to find a good guest, trying to find good guests and trying to find places where I can go and talk to the brands and the business that are relatable to me, that I want to go and talk to. Is very, very difficult. There's a lot of almost manual labor involved, where I have to sort of source these people and find these people and have those conversations. So where did Matchmaker FM come from?
Yeah, so Matchmaker.fm, the premise is very simple. We're here to connect guests with podcasters. Now, you can sit on either side of the fence. You could sit, just like yourself, you can say, I'm a podcaster. I want to interview industry experts. I want to find interesting people to interview. Or if you don't have your own podcast, and perhaps you have expertise in a specific field, and it can really be anything. It doesn't just have to be kind of marketing or, entrepreneurship. It can be, it could be something to do with science. We've got experts in medical professions, music, religion, all sorts of stuff. Okay. And the platform is just designed to make those connections. And really the way it came around was last summer, probably about this time last year, we were, gearing up to launch podcast.co. We were thinking, right, what else could we do? What other marketing funnels could we create, which would, make people more aware of the podcast.co brand? And we came up with this idea of, most podcasts are based, or a fair amount of them, I think it's 60% are based around hosting guests and interviewing people. Okay. So we thought, well, look, why don't we sort of set up a couple of pages, really like, they were just basically like opt-in forms. And we noticed that these opt-in forms of people who were looking to either get more interviewed on more podcasts or find more guests were actually starting to get quite a few opt-ins, and they were getting a lot of traction. So we thought, well, hang on, maybe this is something we could do, which isn't just a funnel, but actually building a product out of this. So the idea for Matchmaker.fm was born. We kind of spent probably a few weeks at the time working with our UI UX designer on kind of creating the mock-up for the product, almost like wireframes, but a little bit better. And we thought, well, let's call it Matchmaker. And initially we were thinking, do we build it as part of podcast.co, just have it for clients? But we thought, well, no, there's a much bigger market out there. So we kind of validated the idea before we actually spent time writing any code. We set up these opt-in forms. We tested the idea. We saw that there was demand there. And then we went about building the product probably back end of last year and brought it to market in, I think it was the middle of February. So we've been live 2.5 months, coming up to 3 months, about to hit 3,000 users. And we haven't really spent a penny on advertising so far.
Wow, that is amazing. I will say, so in the past, so I signed up to Matchmaker when you first launched as a show, first of all. In the past 24 hours / 48 hours maybe, I signed up as a guest, and within that 48 hours, I've managed to source 2 guests for my show, and I've also managed to source appearing on another podcast within that 48 hours. That's how powerful it was. And I will say, it is very super easy to sign up to. It's very super easy to use. Again, in true podcast co-form, it was very easy to use and very accessible. And I think you were right. You didn't want to integrate that into Podcast Co because there is such a bigger market for it. I'm starting to think, I've got clients that I work with from my agency where they've all got businesses and products that they want to talk about, and there'll be podcasts out there which will be related to their verticals, related to their niche. We could get them signed up onto the platform, and they can start talking to and conversing with podcasters in that niche without all that labor intensiveness of having to go and do that audience research. Well, that product research, shall we say, in finding podcasts. So yeah, it's been really, really effective. How did you find sort of marketing the Matchmaker? So you said you've got so many users coming onto the platform. How did you source them in the end, or were they all through the opt-in form?
So the tricky thing is, to begin with, obviously we had some people on the opt-in form. We maybe had, I don't know, say between 50 and 100 on each side. So 50 and 100 podcasts, 50 and 100 guests. When around the time we launched. But, the trick was, well, no one's going to want to go onto this platform if there's no podcasts on there. And likewise, podcasts aren't going to want to go onto this platform without any guests. So the trick was to really try and onboard as many of those initial people as we could, just so it wasn't a ghost town, because no one wants to engage with something where it just seems like a bit of a ghost town.
Yeah.
Because we already had those lists, we were able to quickly kind of at least get a sort of, so we could get some screenshots and sort of show the people this is a real thing. It's not just, there's not just 3 guests on there and 2 podcasts. So that, I think that was good to begin with. The other thing is we made it closed, so you couldn't start browsing guests or seeing podcasts until you'd signed up. So of course, people coming onto the landing page, they would sign up, because they wanted to see what was in it, which obviously encourages people to sign up. I think if we'd have just gone with a very open thing where anyone could browse guests, we wouldn't have had as many sign-ups, because obviously people would say, well, there's only 10 podcasts in this category. So that was kind of the trick. So we do plan on actually turning it into more of an open directory where, anyone on the internet can actually find podcasts, and then actually to make that connection, that's when they've got to sign up. But to begin with, that's why we kind of made the decision to kind of keep it as like a closed sort of ecosystem.
It's a really good point, actually, because I'm thinking in my head that if you'd have made it that open ecosystem that people could be able to see it. Google Plus springs to mind, where it doesn't matter how many in terms of you force people into using it, which was Google's eventual sort of strategy. We're just going to force people into having a Google Plus page. The fact was that Google Plus was a ghost town. No one used it unless you were an uber nerd. And because no one used it and it was open and everyone could see that no one used it, no one wanted to pick it up.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing. We were keen to sort of, and also we wanted to make it manageable for ourselves. We were focusing on filling it with quality podcasts and high quality guests, and that's been the focus for the last sort of 2.5 months. And as a result, the feedback we've been getting has been really good in terms of people like you just said. They've signed up and they've managed to get booked on with say 5 podcasts within the first couple of days of being on the platform. I think I always say to anyone who's thinking about signing up, the key is being proactive. If you sign up and hope for the best, you might get some results because you've just signed up, so you might come up at the top of the list. But I think being proactive and like refining, thinking about what podcasts you want to reach out to as a guest, or if you're a podcast or a podcaster, what guests you want to get on your show, and just sort of starting to send messages. That's the key to really getting the best results out of the platform. But having said all that, we've got so much in the pipeline, and we have been treating it like a startup within a startup. So although podcast.co is the parent company, we have Matchmaker has its own small development team who are specifically focused on iterating and making it better and better. And also as well, we're kind of keen to sort of keep growing it, because I think it's providing a lot of value for people already, which is great to see from our perspective. But obviously we're not charging for it at the moment. It's totally free to everyone. There's no limits. So we obviously have a plan to kind of monetize it. There's always going to be a free tier as well. But it's very exciting.
That it is really exciting. I will say that when I was using the platform over the last 24 hours, I put in, you say you're gonna have to put effort in, you're gonna have to be proactive about it in order to reap rewards, and that's very, very true. To be honest, I put in very, very little effort. Right. Just sort of. I did. It's a case of me just looking through. I wanted to find people, I guess, within my niche, and you provided the categories for me to search by and a location for me to look through. And I was looking at these individual guests. In particular, I found the ability just to be able to hover over people's pictures and find a headline subtitle that people put on their profiles, just to get a feel for people. Allows me to very quickly scan through people, and then just sending a couple of messages out, all within the space of, an hour and a half. Just being able to do that, it was very little effort all in all, and still managed to get those rewards in the back. What is in the pipeline for Matchmaker then? So you say you're going to plan to monetize it. That I think that makes absolutely complete sense. You're going to continue on with the free tier. How does it grow? Because at the end of the day, it's a matchmaking, podcaster guest sort of platform. How do you grow it outside of that?
So I think, well, potentially, that's going to be our first and foremost the focus for the next year. I'd say is just going to be purely in the podcasting space. I think further down the line, we could look at other options. So, for example, we could be introducing advertisers to podcasts, or brands who are looking for podcasts. We could be introducing people who are looking to host shows. So for example, a lot of brands want to start a podcast. They want someone else to front it. So there's loads of, potentially even go down the route of looking at influencers and micro influencers, this kind of thing. So there's so much stuff we could do with this platform. But as I say, to begin with, our focus is in the podcasting space. One of the things that we're going to be doing soon is introducing like an agency plan. So we've had already quite a few PR companies, influencer marketing companies, people who basically represent a bunch of clients, and they want to get them booked on more podcasts. So at the moment, you can sign up for a profile for yourself. I think that's going to be the first route to monetization, is having like an agency plan where they can have, spin up multiple profiles and manage the communications on behalf of, say, 10 different clients that they represent. That seems like a logical next step. And also that will allow us to keep it free for individuals and for podcasters. Further down the line, potentially look at a freemium module for guests. I think, it will always probably be 100% free to podcasters. I think with guests, we might introduce a freemium model where, additional functionality is provided. They have higher message limits or this kind of thing. But again, this is all, in future. So the main focus for now is continuing to grow out the platform, making the features better, and making adding a bunch more sort of bits of functionality, and also opening up the directory just so it's a bit more SEO friendly. Because as I say, Google can't currently crawl any of these profiles. So that's kind of what's coming in the kind of immediate future anyway.
What is the plan to get more people? Because obviously you've got a great user base at the moment. Is it going to be word of mouth? Are you going to implement some kind of marketing strategy? You mentioned SEO there. Is the organic growth and through SEO going to be the main marketing strategy to get more users onto the platform? Because essentially it's not going to grow without that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, as I say, most of the growth so far has been through our own marketing efforts and a lot of outreach as well, which obviously does take time. And it's ensured quality, I think, so far, but certainly it's not that scalable. So I think opening up the profiles so they're crawlable by Google is going to have an impact, because a lot of these people who are on the guest sort of section, they're quite high profile individuals. They have audiences already, so quite often their names in themselves will just be getting some amount of search traffic. I think that will be a good solution for increasing footfall on the website. And next up is just allowing people to share it with their audiences. You can book me as a guest on Matchmaker. You can't currently do that. And I think in sort of encouraging that social sharing capability and sort of again, building it into the workflow. So when we onboard a podcaster, or, when we onboard a guest, having a button which just says, tweet now, hey, fancy getting me on your podcast. You can book me here, click this link. Stuff like that will, I think, really encourage, make more people aware of the platform and help grow it, encourage the footfall to the site as well.
I completely agree. I think that's a really very smart, a very key strategy to have, to be able to sort of, and it's organic as well. I think it's not it's going to actively seek a interested and active audience, which is going to be key to growing that platform. James, it's not often I be able to get what can I say, a founder of a podcasting hosting platform and now a matchmaking service onto the show. So I do know that I'm going to have a lot of people asking me for advice about how to start up their podcast. And I'm sure you get asked this question a hell of a lot. But what is your go-to advice for people that want to start a podcast, from the ground up?
Well, I think the first thing to say is just get started. There's too many people who, in fact, I think I've got a video coming out today saying 4 reasons that will kill your podcast. If you want to see that, it's on my YouTube. Just search James Mulvany. But yeah, one of the reasons I make is people think about starting a podcast quite often for months, sometimes years before they actually do. Now, yeah, of course, it might not be perfect from the start. You're not going to have any, that first episode, you're starting at zero, aren't you? No one is going to be listening to it. Unless you've got a huge amount of marketing collateral or a big audience already, in which case, you can kind of hit the ground running to some extent. But, you've got to build up to it. But ultimately, the sooner you start, the sooner you can embark on that journey. And I think people get too caught up in, oh, what am I going to say? What do I sound like? I don't sound good enough, or, I don't, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. It's just excuses. So I think that's the first and foremost bit of advice, is just actually start doing something. It's not hard to record your first episode, really. There's plenty of tools out there that make it simple, or you can just download a bit of software like Audacity for free. to your computer and start recording. And, I think also the second piece of advice as well is have a good concept. I think gone are the days when podcasts are, two blokes down the pub just having a laugh. I think if you want to get cut through, unless you're really, really funny and you kind of naturally a great comedian or something, you've got to try and have some kind of clever concept, or at least be targeting a market that are hungry for whatever it is you have to offer, I guess. So I think sort of thinking about strategy, thinking about the title of it, all of these sort of things kind of fall into play. And again, there's plenty of resources on podcast.co which kind of talk through all of this sort of stuff.
Well, it's very interesting that you bring that up, because I want to talk to you about digital, Mike. You're an entrepreneur. You have now a huge portfolio of businesses, which I'm sure you've had a very hands-on approach regarding your digital marketing strategy. And I will say this, good. I will say this is that when I've been on the likes of the podcast.co site, when your marketing strategy is actually very, 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 very clever and very, very well thought out. And the reason I say that is because the content that you produce, you surround everything that you do with excellent and fantastic content. And you've managed to, I will say this, and this is going to sound like I'm just, complimenting you up to the clouds, but I will say this, is that even during this downtime that we've had in terms of the lockdown, you've managed to continue that and carry that on. Your content is very well done and made, and written, but also very well presented. And I think that's, I think there's always a misconception with content marketing as a whole, is that you can just write content and it doesn't matter how you present it, and it doesn't matter how it looks or anything like that. It's just a case of write content, get it out there, and, inevitably an audience will come. I'm sure you're not a prescriber of that.
No, I think you've got to put everything you've got into content and take it seriously as a business. As a software company, technically, we are a software company, right? I've always, for the last at least sort of 4 or 5 years, had almost like a media arm or a production arm of the company in-house. So we actually have, for example, one full-time, one part-time videographers, right? Whose job it is to make videos all day, every day. And most of their work, we do a bit of client work now with the podcast side of stuff, but most of the work is internal. Most of it's just creating content to promote our products and services and deliver value to the marketplace. We have, a marketing team who are writing content all day, again, all in-house, and the team are all very passionate about the subjects that they're actually creating content for. So I think that's kind of one of the key things, is find people who are, really passionate about podcasting or whatever it is, the service that you're trying to market. That's kind of one of the most important things. And you're right, just writing something or just kind of copying someone else doesn't always work. It's interesting because on radio, we have a competitor who, in the early days was literally just copying every piece of content we put out, just literally mimicking it. And it was kind of so frustrating for the guys at the office who'd spent a lot of time working on, sometimes it can be a couple of days working on, a long form bit of content, or it can even be longer if you think about the time it's spent researching, etc. And then just to have someone copy, it's kind of frustrating. But ultimately, you've got to be original, and you've got to think about what your audience are actually wanting. And I think they respond well to that. They can kind of see that, that you're spending time doing this and you're establishing your brand as an authority or as a kind of knowledge, what's the word? Sort of like a knowledgeable character, I suppose, but, as a brand within a marketplace. And I think, it's really, really powerful. So I'm huge on content, very passionate about it. And I quite enjoy making it as well. I think it's fun to pass on your knowledge to others.
I think that's really, really key. And I'm going to refer you back to a point, because you were saying that before, and I think it's fantastic. You've employed a full-time and a part-time videographer, and their job is just to go around and create this content. And I'm thinking about, if I said that to some of my clients, I think they'd absolutely run for the hills, because I think all they'd say back to me is going, well, is there any ROI on that? Is there any return on investment on me having a full-time member of staff running around just making video content? What would you say in response to someone that was saying that back to you?
Well, I mean, as I say, we've always created video, and we used to do it, the marketing team sort of used to do it. We kind of all would take part in creating video, and the videos were good, but they weren't really amazing. When you hire someone who's specifically, for that role, and they're an expert in shooting and editing, it just takes things to the next level, which again helps you stand out from your competition, most of your competition won't have that luxury. So the content, if they are making videos, they'll either just be outsourced, which is never as good, because I think, whenever we've tried outsourcing video in the past, it's not been great. They don't really understand the business fully, etc. So I think that's the benefit of bringing it in-house, really, is you've got someone who's kind of living and breathing what you do and kind of really gets it. And ultimately as well, you can spend time, creating content and revising it to make sure that it's spot on.
Mm-hmm. I think but
it is quite hard. Sorry to mention the ROI thing. I'd say it is quite hard to measure when you're spending. You've got a team of, say, 5 people working on content for a brand. Your ROI ultimately is going to be overall how many customers you're getting through the door, what deals are coming from it, and again, sometimes it's a you're playing the long-term game, because you create content. So, for example, with podcast.co, before we launched, we were writing blog posts and creating videos the year before we actually had anything to sell.
Yeah.
Because it takes time,
It is mad, and I think I was there. I was almost there watching that journey, because you were creating content and you didn't have that product. It's not until very, very recently you've had the pricing model set up. Where you've built and created that audience, which has been. And I think the other part of that, which I think I want to talk to you about, is this idea that I think some business owners, some entrepreneurs, they may think, well, the marketing will just solve everything. It'll solve every problem. And I think with your product set, what you've actually managed to achieve, first of all, you've entered a market which is a podcast hosting a management platform is a diluted market. There are a lot of other competitors. Yeah, it's a crowded market, and you have to be good in order to sort of stand out in that in itself. But also you've managed to stand out in that, like we mentioned before, in terms of its usability. And so you've had this balance really between, you've got a good product and you've managed to really stand out in terms of the content that you sort of churn out as well. So you have to have both. Sometimes people just think, well, I've got this crap product and I'm just going to market it, and the marketing will just solve everything for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think, content links into marketing, really, doesn't it, as well? But it's just, I'm a big believer. I don't think I'd ever be able to launch a business without having a good content strategy. It's just so, I think it's just so good. And it's funny because you're right. There's still a lot of people who aren't really taking it that seriously, or they're not doing a very good job of it. So immediately you've got something that positions you in a sort of better place than a lot of your competition. And it's the same in the podcast space. There's still a lot of the other companies that they're not really delivering much value to the marketplace outside of their offering. Like, they don't necessarily, all of them have a good content strategy in place. Some do, some don't. But that was definitely our route to market, to kind of make some noise, and also just things like the branding as well. We wanted to make the brand podcast.co quite a fun brand. We used to have like a bright orange homepage. We've sort of toned it down a bit now, but there's still very colourful, lots of elements to it which are kind of quite fun and playful, which again, a lot of the other sort of players in the market aren't like that at all.
No, absolutely. I mean, it is a very modern brand. It really does stand out. And again, it's another one of those elements that sometimes some business owners, some entrepreneurs, they fall down on because they don't want to spend that amount of effort in. And I think what I get the feeling is that every single element within that business has had a lot of thought and a lot of effort put into it. It's not just been a slapdash kind of output, which is really great to see, and really great to see from my personal point of view, essentially a Manchester-based agency. I mean, you're up the road from me, which is really fantastic to see.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks very much.
So, James, I think you're in lockdown at the moment. We don't know when we're going to be coming out of this. I'm guessing that your podcast intake, in terms of what you've been listening to, has either increased or has perhaps changed. So what are the current podcasts that you are listening to at the moment?
That's a good question. Let's have a look. Sam Talks, right? I was interviewed on this podcast a while ago, and this is what I've got open right this second when I open up the podcast app. That's pretty good. Sam Sethi, he's a great guy. He's got some interesting interviews on there. I'm going to name drop my own podcast. Why not? Create, Reach, Inspire, which we just finished the second season of. you know, and sort of a bunch of others. I'm one of these people, right? I kind of hop from podcast to podcast. I don't listen. I don't like watching like these 24-part Netflix documentaries. I just don't have the time, and I'm kind of the same with podcasts. I will sort of listen to one episode here and one episode there, rather than sort of obsessing over a whole season and making sure I listen to every episode of something. So. Yeah,
it's the beauty of on demand, I suppose, isn't
absolutely,
it? Absolutely, you can pick and choose. Yeah, no, I'm of the same thing. I must say, sometimes I get very, very into a podcast. For example, I've now listened to the British History podcast for about 3 years now, because there's about 500 episodes that I've got to get through, and I'm still only in 1066 around this point of view from in terms of British history, which is mad. But yeah, I'm the same. I sort of pick up podcasts at the go. I'm currently listening to the Scrubs podcast, which has come out with Zach Braff and Donald Faison, which is going really, really well and is very, very entertaining. James, what can I say? Thank you so much for joining me. What else have you got going on at the moment? You've got your lunchtime videos that you're still doing at the moment as well.
Yes, Working Lunch is called. That's every Wednesday at 1 p.m. UK time, which are good fun, actually. You know, it's just like a live podcast, isn't it? So every single week I speak to a different guest. The theme is really quite loose. So it's around growing business, growing your team, or growing your audience. And I basically ask each guest just to bring to the table like 3 strategies that, you know, or 3 areas of topics of discussion. So that's quite good. And that's one of these things I actually started because we, you know, LinkedIn Live, have you come across that yet?
Yeah.
You know, you have to either be invited or be approved. And either way, it takes a while to get approved. I think there's more. I've noticed now there seems to be a lot more people doing it. But at the back in the last year I applied, it was like October. Didn't get approved until I think it was February time. And I thought, well, I need to do something with it now. So I was like, right, what can I do? And this is how this concept came about. And it was very much just like one afternoon. I thought, oh, I'm going to do this. And it's just, we've kept doing it every single week. So it's been good fun. And, you know, I think it kind of, the sort of the breadth of different topics that I've discussed on it is incredible. And the amount of people I've spoken to, again, it's crazy. People I would have never had conversations with otherwise. It's just the same as podcasting. I think both mediums are fantastic for networking.
Some of the best ideas do come from just going, what can I do? And then just sort of going with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
James, before I let you go, please let everyone know where they can find you, where they can follow you, and find out anything else that's going on.
Yeah, so I'm at jamesm.com. That's my website. Podcast.co, obviously, and at matchmaker.fm. And I'm on all the social channels if you want to just search for James Mulvany. I'm putting out lots of content myself now, as well as through the brands that we run.
And I will say this, you know, if you are someone, you know, a business person, an entrepreneur, whatever it is, and you're looking to get yourself out there, and you're looking to try and expose your name and your personal brand a little bit more, then I will recommend getting yourself onto the Matchmaker platform, because I think it's a really good opportunity. And if you want to be a place where you need to be at, and you want to get into communicate with the niche audiences that you need to communicate with in order to expand and help your business, then that is the place to be. It's on podcasting, it's on audio platforms, and Matchmaker is just growing and growing and growing. James, thank you so much.
Cheers, Tom. It's been great. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much to James Mulvany from Podcast Co and Matchmaker.fm for coming on to the Digital Marketing Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, or you have any questions, queries, or feedback about the show, then please do get in touch. I would love to hear from you. So you can do that. You can email us, punkcast@dmpunk.co.uk. You can also connect with me across all of the social media platforms. You can find me on Facebook, facebook.com/IamDMPunk, or on Twitter @IamDMPunk, and Instagram @IamDMPunk. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn by searching for Digital Marketing Punk, and you will find me. It would also be great, if you haven't done so already, if you could go and subscribe to the Digital Marketing Podcast. And if you really like the show and you can help me out, you can show your appreciation by giving us a 5-star review on iTunes. It will really help me out. So I hope you enjoyed the show, and I hope you will join me the next episode of the Digital Marketing Punkcast. I will see you then.